the speed of commerce is different than the speed of hard money like gold. So once we basically developed telecommunications channels and we could, send money globally, ledger to ledger, the whole euro-dollar system, we had this big abstraction between, abstractions for gold and gold itself. And then you can centralize gold, and then you could drop gold altogether and have a fiat-based system. So one problem is that we have an inflationary system, and that's problematic enough in developed countries, but let alone in smaller and more developing countries. They have much higher inflation levels on average, and usually within their lifetime they experience a hyperinflation and they just lose their savings if they were holding that currency. So that's number one, is all the inflationary angle. And then number two is the fact that it's mostly permissioned, and so you need permission from your bank to do things, and that can, again, in some countries that gets pretty benign, and in other countries that are more authoritarian, and according to estimates from like Freedom House, the way they depict it, about half the world lives under something that's classified as authoritarian or semi-authoritarian.
Yeah.
So permission systems are obviously a big problem in that regard. And so the combination of not having developed savings and payments technology that's pretty open and having inflationary currency is really bad for a lot of people around the world.
Right. Okay. Well, when you talk to people about some of the historians on money, they talk about the lifespan of a currency, and it starts as a collectible, then it becomes a store of value, then a medium exchange, and then a unit of account. That's the kind of journey we're going on, and we're going on that same journey with Bitcoin. And these periods, where transitional periods, they're not like hard-lined changes. Bitcoin is arguably a medium of exchange because we know people use it, people spend it, but it's not used a lot as a medium of exchange. It's just a few kind of outlier cases. We have El Salvador now has the ability for anyone to do it, but I'm sure the numbers are pretty low. When you look at Bitcoin and you look at the lifestyle of a currency, where do you kind of see it? What are the optimistic things for you?
Well, I think what Satoshi invented was basically the world's best ledger, right? So I think Darren Feinstein would call it triple entry bookkeeping.
I think I was sat with John Pfeffer, and he said Wentz's orange pilled him on it. He said money is a ledger, and Bitcoin is the best ledger.
Yes, that's the best way to describe it. Basically, I think the best way to describe money, it's either the most saleable good, which is the kind of the more commodity-oriented view of money, and I think that's accurate. And another way to describe it is that it's ledgers, and usually ledgers correspond to commodity monies in history, but they don't have to, obviously in the current era. And so in that sense, the best ledger, the one that is, you can't fudge the numbers, is not opaque, right? And so the combination of the best ledger with a hard unit of account in that ledger system is a pretty marvelous revolution.
Yeah.
And that brings, it's basically faster than gold, but more auditable and harder than fiat. And so it kind of acts as its own decentralized transfer agent and registrar, which is it's a marvelous technology. And I think he solved a lot of problems, and it's still very early on in its testing and adoption phase. So, initially it had some bugs. Initially, cypherpunks were interested in it for what it could be. Then you started to see practical use cases of people getting deplatformed, where people want to buy things they're not supposed to. So for both good reasons and bad reasons, people saw this as permissionless, censorship-resistant medium of exchange. So actually pretty early on in its adoption cycle, it's a medium of exchange was right there from the beginning.
Yes.
But it's not optimized for everyone just to buy coffee with it around the world, 1 billion transactions a second, whatever. That's not what it's meant for. It's meant for that censorship-resistant money that's kind of everybody's backup money if you get deplatformed or if you need this in any way. And of course, we can build layers on top of it to also make it everyday money. But I think that's the biggest thing, that it basically gave everyone the ability to have one, portable money, so you can self-custody money and then even bring that globally, which is actually really hard to do with gold or cash or things like that. And the number two is that you can then do a transaction that is very hard to block.
And you were initially dismissive of Bitcoin, right? Like we all were.
Yes. From the first time I heard about it, I thought it was cool. Like, I never was like, oh, that's rubbish or that's bad. But I was like, why can't someone copy it? Why can't, it seems neat, but I don't know how to price it. I didn't really fully get it. So I was always kind of like, I'm rooting for those guys, but I don't know So only after multiple encounters with it did I kind of fully look into it and realize that there's something more here that I was missing.
And you feel like there's not enough now focus on Lightning. We need to get a little bit more attention to it.
At least outside of the Bitcoin ecosystem. I think that there's still very little awareness of Lightning, how it works roughly, what it means.
Yeah, so if Bitcoin is the best ledger, then Lightning is perhaps the best payments network in the world. And I think we should get into why that is, because the more I understand about Lightning, the more I understand about the traditional payment networks and how they can stop or block transactions and the way they add fees. If Bitcoin had a dollar stablecoin on it, it would be a big threat, I think, to Visa and MasterCard for their debit networks.
I think so, and especially, the first couple years of Lightning is very low liquidity. But we've hit kind of a critical mass now where it's quite liquid and the wallet solutions and things like that are pretty good. So even though there's still work to be done, there's still limitations, there's still privacy improvements that can be made, this is now a very workable system with a very strong network effect. And most macro kind of institutional size entities will dismiss it or not even have heard of it because, total locked Bitcoin on it is, a little over 4,000 Bitcoin, which as of today is something like, $100 million. It's peanuts in the global scale. But I think if you're looking at how it works and seeing that it gets better every year, and you're seeing the growth rate and the rise in liquidity, I think we're reaching that critical mass. I think we've reached it basically at the beginning of 2021 or so. And I think now we're firmly into the part where it's just increasingly usable system.
Can you explain to me a little bit how the Visa and MasterCard network works and some of the inherent flaws in it that Bitcoin maybe solves?
Sure. So Visa and MasterCard and payment systems like that are not settlement networks. You're not doing final settlement. They're a layer on top of a layer on top of a layer.
Another ledger.
Yeah, it's another ledger. It's basically a way for banks to agree. And so Visa and MasterCard themselves don't carry debt. They're just operating the mechanism for banks to come to this consensus. And so when we look at, say, the U.S. banking system.
Oh, hold on a second. So that's kind of interesting. So they don't actually control any money. All they're doing is telling each bank what they have to settle with each other at the end of the day.
They're basically an IT companies, yeah.
Huh.
Whereas American Express and Discover, they are both those systems, but then they also are their own bank, so they hold debt as well. Whereas Visa and MasterCard are networks.
So basically a communication network for communicating what people owe each other.
Yeah, yeah.
Huh, I never knew that.
I never thought of it like that.
And how does that tend to work? Is it immediate settlement they're telling people, or is there end of day settlement that, do they, I don't know, if you've got two banks that say, well, you owe this one and you owe this one this, and they just settle? How does that actually work?
It's changed a little bit over time as settlements gotten a little bit faster. So that part is malleable, but it's not instant settlement. And basically, so there's when a bank issues a card,
yeah,
they're the ones taking on the risk, really. And so you have that bank. You also have the merchant's bank.
Yeah.
Right. So you have both the cardholder's bank, the merchant's bank. You have the network in the middle. You have a bunch of intermediaries along the way, and everyone has to get their fee. Right. So it's not a super low fee system.
Mm-hmm.
It's efficient. It's workable. A lot of times we happily use it instead of cash, but it's not a free system. There's pretty high fees. And then number two, they rely on settlement networks like Fedwire for the actual gross final settlement. So, any given day, there's like countless millions of transactions, and they're not actually sending money back and forth each time. They're kind of reconciling at the end of the day or every other day. It changes over time, but they're batching multiple transactions together into final settlements that happen over settlement networks like Fedwire.